welcome to this first episode of aRDists podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Kerr, and I don't know what I'm doing. I wanted to start this first episode just kind of expressing some of my feelings about this whole process. So if you're not aware of who I am, hello, I'm Sarah. So I'm an artist, I'm a video editor, and I'm a registered dietitian. I never really know what to call myself because I do a lot of different things, and that can be lead to a lot of imposter syndrome where I don't feel like I'm an expert at anything. So if you listen to the teaser episode, you might notice that the name sounded a little weird, and that's because I decided to change the name of this podcast at the very last minute. So I was literally editing it together, and I didn't want to have to refilm it and say the new name, so I just chopped up the old name. So it sounds a little bit wonky. I originally wanted to call this Artists and Creators in Dietetics Podcast, but I felt like that was way too long, and I just wanted to be simple, straightforward, and so that's why I went with aRDists. The RD meaning registered dietitian, for those of you who happen to be watching this who aren't from my RD circle. So yeah, that's where the name came from. So I wanted to try to figure out what format I want to do for this podcast, and I'm really not certain yet. I want to leave it sort of open to be whatever it's going to be for that episode. I know some people do games in episodes or interviews, or they just have stream of conscience sort of things. A lot of the podcasts that I watch typically have more than one host, so it would be nice to have occasional episodes with other people. The struggle I have with that is that I live in the suburbs of Oregon and I'm an introvert, so socializing with other people is not my strong suit. Not that I hate people, it takes a lot of energy out of me to socialize. But anyway, in trying to figure out a format for this podcast, my husband and I had experimented with starting a podcast way early on in the pandemic. We noticed a few other people that we follow, social media people, were starting podcasts during the pandemic as well. You know, they're stuck at home just like we were, and they started a podcast. So I was like, we should do that. And I don't remember where exactly, what situation we were in that it originated, but we really liked the scene from The Office where Dwight and Jim are holding up a sign that says 0 days since our last nonsense, you know? So we thought it would be kind of fun to have a podcast called 0 days since our last nonsense. And each episode we would kind of talk about what nonsense was going on in our life. So whether that be someone annoying in traffic or, just having to go to the grocery store and dealing with, I don't know, whatever, just nonsense. And we filmed one episode and I edited it and then I didn't post it. So we ended up not doing it. And I still like the idea of that, 0 days since our last nonsense. And so I thought I would start off each episode with kind of a throwback to that podcast that we tried to do and talk about what nonsense I have going on. But honestly, I mentioned, I wrote down in my notes that I wanted to have that be the start of the podcast, but I didn't actually put any thought into what nonsense I've been experiencing. So I don't have anything. Maybe we'll do that at the end. I'll think on it. I'm going to drink some tea now. Now that I'm thinking about it, one thing that has been an ongoing piece of nonsense for me is I still have Christmas gifts that I have not mailed out. It's January 13th that I'm filming this, and yeah, I still have not mailed out all of my Christmas gifts, so I am on the ball with that. And the reason for that is I hate going to the post office, and it's not just a matter of there's always a line. It's a matter of there's this one guy at my local post office who is just a dick. and I don't like interacting with him. Like, he has no sense of humor. And then last time I was in there, he like made a very serious like statement. Like, it didn't sound like he was joking at all. And then he laughed at me because I didn't get the joke, and then said, "Oh, you can," he like dismissed me because it wasn't flying. And I was like, wow, you're hard to understand. And so I've been kind of procrastinating with actually going to the post office to mail things. And yeah, there we go. That's my nonsense. Not really relevant to anything, but that's what's going on in my little introvert mind. So I wanted to talk a little bit, I guess I could talk a little bit about like why I'm focusing my career as a dietitian in like visual media. So I have always been a very visual learner. If somebody reads off instructions about something or says something out loud, if it's a really lengthy thing, not just like, hey, go put this pot up on the counter, some simple instruction like that. Like, if it's a more elaborate, detailed explanation, I do better if I see it visually. And I find, obviously, nutrition science to be a very complicated subject. And for people who don't have, the basic, that aren't on the same page as us with like how do I word this? For the, lay person who hasn't gone through the same education that we have, it can be, and let's say their only interaction is, auditory, conversations with a dietitian in person for like a 15-minute consult or something after the doctor referred them, or, talking to a dietitian in the hospital for a couple minutes, and most of it's just about, hey, do you want an Ensure? That's not, for a lot of people like myself who require more like visual understanding of, the information and the why and how it all works, to get that like holistic view of, what is going on inside of them. That's where I want to like find myself. I want to be involved in videos. I want to be involved in illustrations, not only for the public, but also for fellow dietitians. So, because when we're learning nutrition science, it's really helpful to have good visuals. Obviously, like in textbooks, there's pictures and graphs and, things like that, but having more visuals to help understand, chemicals and metabolic pathways and those sorts of things. That's the sort of stuff that I want to be working on. And so with this podcast, I want it to be, I don't know. I guess I'm struggling with what I want this podcast to be exactly. I want to be able to demonstrate and inspire other people looking to get into the field, and those who are a little like, I don't know what I'm doing here, because that's how I definitely felt after I graduated, to see like alternative pathways that you can take. And I definitely feel like there's a shift away from just traditional dietitian services. And I didn't know all of the avenues that you could take with dietetics until after I graduated. And the undergraduate program that I was in was so focused on, food service, clinical, and community. And it just it didn't thoroughly introduce me to all of the things that I could be doing. And I don't think I know very many people that are doing like art and illustration as dietitians. There's not that many people. There's a handful that I know of, but not like a ton. So yeah, I don't know what I'm doing or how this podcast is going to fall together. I'm just kind of trusting the process. I definitely had a lot of, not a lot, but just I noticed it sort of simmering under the surface, like anxiety of sitting down to film this, because I'm like, oh, I don't really have a script. I don't really have a plan. Like, I have an outline of things that I want to talk about, but when I typed it out, it was kind of like stream of consciousness, and it was just kind of, type, just these are my thoughts right now. And I'd rather just say like, talk about this, and have it be stream of conscience in the moment, rather than think it twice, because it's less organic the second time. But one thing you'll probably notice about me if you continue to listen to these episodes is that I can sometimes not finish a sentence. I talked to my therapist about whether or not I have ADHD, and it just doesn't quite fit for me. I think anxiety is the underlying issue that I've had all my life, and it's been not dealt with. And so I've masked it in some ways, and then it shows itself in other ways. And so I think I'm very hyper aware of the presence of things around me or the people that I know are going to be watching this. And so I distract myself and think a separate thought while I'm speaking, and then I lose my thought, which I kind of feel it happening right now. And I just started a new group program for rewiring your brain from anxiety. And it was just the first week this past week. And it was definitely helpful. We're basically like working through chapters in this book, Rewiring the Anxious Brain. I forget the author. I could look it up. Who is it? Rewire Your Anxious Brain. How to use the neuroscience. Rewire Your Anxious Brain, How to Use the Neuroscience of Fear to End Anxiety, Panic, and Worry by Catherine Pittman and Elizabeth Carl. I'm only the first chapter in, but having the understanding that there's two pathways for anxiety. So you're basically thinking it versus it's instinctually happening. And so sometimes I just have I don't know if it's a trauma response or just like I've wired my brain from a past experience to get anxious in certain situations without even realizing it. So I have a amygdala response, so it's just automatically happening. I'm sweaty, I can't think, and the amygdala kind of shuts off the cortex. Not completely, but it blocks some of the thinking ability. And so in social situations, for example, someone will ask me a question, but I'm just so anxious that I just can't think of a cohesive, well thought out sentence to say. And it'll often be rushed and less than eloquent. And I definitely leave situations feeling like that didn't go well. So I don't remember where I was going with this, but basically don't know what I'm doing with this podcast. Wow. And nobody logged in to watch me again. So because I am a little anxious, because this is my first full episode, let me resort to my pre-typed out script. So I said a little bit about me. I'm an introvert and an HSP, which is a highly sensitive person. Very, very simple explanation means I recharge with quiet alone time, and I'm very sensitive to the people and situations around me. I'm primarily a visual learner, as I said, and style of art that I tend to focus on is realism, and I work in paint and colored pencils. However, I love to dabble in all sorts of things. So a little bit about my business. I started the Kerminator LLC in 2021, focusing primarily on graphic design and video editing for dietitians, but I work with other people. I also do demo reels for actors and directors and that sort of thing. What else? So I can tell you a little bit about my journey to get here. So I grew up in upstate New York, and some of the careers that I considered were veterinarian. That was like one of the earliest things that I can remember that I was drawn to because I liked animals. And then I don't remember what else I wanted to be. I considered an architect because I liked the CAD drawing, but I preferred hand drawing. It's just that nobody was really doing that. So I wasn't that into using the computer to do it. So I, didn't follow through on that. So while I was in high school, I started working for a studio that made all sorts of things from like chef coats to embroidered blankets to, they sold honey and candles and all sorts of things. And I had the opportunity to work on their website and do graphic design for them, website like copywriting, marketing, designing. I designed a chef coat style, and I just had a lot of different opportunities to like dabble in a lot of things at this place. And so when it was time to graduate, I was like, I could go to college and not really have a major because I don't know what I want to do, or I could just not go to college and continue working here. So I decided to do that. And a few years went by, and let's see, I moved out of my parents' house when I was 19, and I moved about 40 minutes away, if that. And I lived in this like little studio apartment with a little mini spiral staircase up to the loft. While I was living there, maybe it was like, it may have been slightly before that, but I met my husband. Basically, to make the long story short, I met my husband on the internet. And he offered to come out to New York to meet me on his Christmas leave because he was in the Marines and he was getting out soon and planning on heading back to Oregon. We'd been speaking, talking for a few months, and he's like, hey, do you want to meet up? I can, fly out there on my Christmas break. My family doesn't really celebrate. And so I was like, yeah, sure, come out. And he met me, he met my parents. We got along great. And he asked me, do you want to move out to Oregon? And I was kind of like ready for a change. Like I'd been in New York all my life and kind of just wanted to go on an adventure. So a few months later, I went out to Oregon for the first time and we looked at apartments, and then I rented a U-Haul and we moved my ass all the way across the country. And that was quite an adventure. And when I got to Oregon, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with myself. I had that one job doing a lot of different things, but I wasn't necessarily an expert in anything. It was kind of like I dabbled in quite a few things. So I applied to a few jobs, and the first job I got was working for a school photography company, and it was only a seasonal job, so it tided me over for a few months, but I obviously needed something else. And after that, I got hired as a quality control person at this embroidery shop. And it was loud. It was cold in the winter, hot in the summer, because it was just like this big warehouse. I really did not enjoy working there, but I stayed for about a year. And then I kept finding like these really stupid jobs like that I was not super thrilled about. I tried, I think, a month at JCPenney because I just wanted to retail. Let's experience that. I worked at a Michael's and I hated the manager so much. I told his boss that he was an asshole and I left. I was like, I don't like this. It was kind of like we got locked in once we were in because we were night shift and there was no way for me to go out. And they never had enough box knives to cut open the boxes because we were restocking shelves. And so I would always bring my pocket knife, and I forgot it in my car, but I couldn't get out because they locked the front doors, which I'm just like, fire hazard? Like, how are we doing this? But they didn't provide materials for me to do my job, and I complained to the guy. I was like, I need a box knife. Like, how do you expect me to open this? He's like, you got to share, but everybody's like scattered all over the store. Anyway, this is like rant. His boss came in one night and was trying to like rally the troops, like, we can get through this and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like so fed up with it. And I don't even remember the exact situation, but I just blew up and I said, this guy's an ass. And she just kind of like nodded. Like, I don't know if she was just kind of a listening ear, or if it was a nod of agreement, but the guy was just not my cup of tea. Anyway, long story short, I worked a lot of stupid jobs, didn't like, and my boyfriend at the time, I think he was a little sick of me just complaining about it, like complaining in a way that was annoying and not helpful, and instead of asking for advice or help. But he ended up, he didn't say this in a nasty way, but he was like, you could spend your whole life, how did he word it? Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank now. Because I was basically I was stuck in this thing where I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. Like, what is my career? What is that going to be? And he's like, you could spend your whole life trying to decide what to do, or you can get off your ass and make a decision. And he phrased it like that. But again, he didn't say it in a nasty way. I took it as like as helpful ball busting. He's like, why don't you check out PCC, the community college, and check out, degrees, and start looking at careers, like go back to like a career search and like figure out what interests you and go back to school. And so I started doing that. I came across criminal sketch artists. That's one thing that I was interested in, but most sketch artists are police officers. So you don't just, hire a civilian to do that sort of thing. So I was like, oh, what could I do here? Like, could I maybe work in law enforcement? Like, what would I do? And so I did a couple month program called like Citizens Academy is what it's called. And it's basically, you can go in and see what the sheriff's department is like. And you shadow an officer, and you can, patrol officer, and then you also shadow someone in the jail. And so I did both of those things, and it was, I didn't really want to do that. The only thing I could think is like maybe forensics, but I have a really bad gag reflex, especially with like really nasty smells. So it just, if something came up, which something probably would come up with dead, rotting flesh, probably wouldn't be for me. If it's fresh, I can probably deal, but rot is not my thing. So after that, I came across a documentary, which I don't want to necessarily promote it, because after going through undergrad and like learning what I learned, it's like, they didn't do the best job of like presenting that information. But I watched a nutrition documentary that intrigued me, and I learned the term dietitian because I frankly didn't know what a dietitian was or that it existed. So yeah, I feel like that's a lot of people's experiences who are dietitians, or at least a lot of people that I've encountered, is that they didn't even know what a dietitian was or what they do. So I started looking into it, and I was looking into nutrition science. I was like, oh wow, like there's such like an impact that eating food can have on you. It's like, what a novel idea. Who'd have thought that food has such an impact on so much about you? And so I looked up programs in my area that have it, and there are only 2 schools in Oregon that offered the Ascend accredited, program, the DPT programs. And so it was either Oregon State University or University of Oregon. I'm up here, and Corvallis is here 2 hours away, and then University of Oregon is like another hour south. So it's like, do I go to the 2-hour away school or the 3-hour away school? So it wasn't even an option. I just applied for the Oregon State University to get into their nutrition program. I got accepted. I did some of my like back core courses at PCC, so I wouldn't have to travel as much. But I did commute for 5 years to OSU from the Portland area to, that was a ridiculous amount of commuting. I used to have a pickup truck, and I would drive that down. That was like my first, I want to say, term down to OSU, and my truck got, I want to say like 18 or 19 miles to the gallon, 21 on a good day. So that was not financially feasible. And plus the upkeep on my truck, because it was a 1999 Chevy, it was old and rusty because it came from the East Coast. And so there was a lot of maintenance that needed to happen that I couldn't afford as a student. And so a friend of mine had just gotten a lease of a smart car, and he's like, yeah, it's like super cheap. It was only, $75 a month or something to lease it. And I was like, that I can afford. That's a little bit more reasonable than my truck. And plus I had to look into like whether the electric one versus the gas one would be best for me. Because if the electric one was not going to make me to, get me to Corvallis, I don't want to get stuck halfway there in the middle of nowhere. So I got the gas version, and that one gets 35-ish miles to the gallon. So more than, it's like double what I was getting with my truck. I put over 100,000 miles on that thing in a couple years. It was like 20,000 miles a year at least. I survived that. And then I did my dietetic internship also at OSU. I only applied to, I think, 2 locations. So I applied to Oregon State University, and then I applied to the Garden to Table program up in Washington. It's a distance DI, but there's like part of it is done up there. But I didn't want to have to commute up to like Seattle area. And I was having a hard time finding preceptors. That's another thing that's, really difficult is finding clinical preceptors. So I just ultimately put OSU as my top choice and ended up getting it, thankfully. But I was also kind of at the point in my path of feeling like, if I get it, I get it. If I don't, oh well. I'll find something else to do. I know a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves to get accepted and get that internship, but I was just at a point where I was like, either way, whatever happens, however the cards fall, I'll roll with it. But I ended up getting the internship, and so I was, partially like, oh shit, now I have to actually do this. And knowing me, I knew that, working in the hospital was going to be the hardest part, and that ended up being my first rotation. And shout out to all my preceptors at Salem Health. You ladies were very patient with me. To say I cried almost every day is accurate. So anyway, I've probably talked for like 40 minutes at this point. So what else do I have? Yeah, that's basically my path to becoming a dietitian. It's, you know, it is what it is. So yeah, that I guess is enough. It's a little bit of, you know, about me, what I'm doing here, that I don't know what I'm doing. What am I, who have I got here? If you enjoyed this, if you have suggestions for what I should do, topics you want me to cover, whether it's, you know, aRDists that I find inspiration from, or if you want me to interview someone specific, let me know. If you want to host your own episode, I have a form on my website. Just go to thecarminator.com and then click on podcast. There's a form on that page that you can fill out to request to host your own episode if you want to. Because I don't want it to be just me. I want the aRDists to be, you know, talking about their experiences, talking about their process, talking about their what they do in the field. And also not just aRDists, not just dietitians who, first of all, not just dietitians, other healthcare workers as well, primarily dietitians, because that's who my main audience is. But talking about balancing work and life, because sometimes art is not a business, it is a therapeutic process that we do. So yeah, I mean, I'm open to hearing ideas and thoughts and having other people come on and host or interview. As far as scheduling up, like upload schedule, I'm probably going to stick to once a month for now, just because getting back into the new year, I have a lot on my plate that I'm trying to get going. And so I'm just going to set the bar kind of low for myself and just do one episode a month. So you can expect another episode in February. Specific date TBD, probably the second or third week of February. So yeah, if you want to hear more, hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And there's also a version on YouTube if you're not watching the YouTube version. And yeah, thanks so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.